Titan Minerals is focused on the development of copper-gold projects in Ecuador. Before we go through the slides, this is a shot of Dynasty, our primary gold project. It's currently got a resource of a couple of million ounces at 4.5 grams. What's interesting about this slide is to give you an indication of the country and the sort of topography we're dealing with. The site's located at about 1,200 metres above sea level, supported by regional infrastructure, the Pan American Highway, regional roads coming into both of the ends of the property. Sparsely populated, the community is mainly subsistence corn growing. They supplement their income that way, and they move out of the area to get employment. So it's a fairly low socio-economic standard of economy. At this part of this is all in southern Ecuador. There's no Amazonian jungle issues. There's no indigenous groups against mining. The history of mining in this part of the country is very positive and generally well supported by the community. We acquired these assets we did an on-market bid for Core Gold, which we closed last May. We own 100% of those assets. As part of that, we restructured the business, and we currently have the 5 projects shown here in the green boxes. Each of those companies is owned in its own company, and it's held as a 100% subsidiary of Titan Minerals. What's important is you look at Dynasty, Copper, Duke and Linderos are all in the Miocene belt, which is a prolific age of rock where you see a lot of these big copper-gold porphyries in South America. The Dynasty Project, as I mentioned, is our primary asset, currently sporting a 2.1 million ounce resource with a head grade of 4.5 grams. Copper Duke is a multi-phase copper-gold porphyry regarded as a tier 1 asset by a lot of people. Linderos is a porphyry associated with a high sulfidation gold system, and a very exciting opportunity that we've been working on this last 6 months. And we've got an exploration property, copper fields, and a small high-grade epithermal gold project called Jerusalem, which is on the east of the country. It's currently invaded by small-scale miners, but that's an epithermal vein swarm running a foreign resource of 1.2 million ounces, around 14 grams. Taking a closer look at the Dynasty Project. The Dynasty Project is a vein corridor that's a massive vein swarm. It's about 9 kilometres long. It was originally explored back in 2011 and 12 by Dynasty Mining and Metals, the original owners. And they essentially went into the country and channel sampled the topographic highs, and then stepped back from that and drilled shallow holes and put together a foreign resource, a polygonal estimate. The reason we call it a foreign resource is with the ASX we have to report against the JORC standard. The way it was initially developed is they had access at the southern end and the northern end, so the main resources are either end of the property. There's a 4-kilometre gap in the middle with no drilling. They trenched it all the way along, and there's veining all the way along the whole 9 kilometres. In the northeast corner at the top, it butts into the Bromidero licence, which is held by Sunstone Resources. We've highlighted on this area here a red or brown dotted area, which is we refer to as the mineralised zone. That's where the exploration has been done to date. It's not a geologic boundary though. The other dotted areas are where we see at the moment the geology extending. The issue is that some of the slopes are covered with about 1 to 2 metres of alluvium, so you don't get to see through to the surface. So all the work is topographic highs, and it's limited to that area you see in the slide there. This is a close-up of the Sera Verde area, which is the southern end. It's a figure that represents a 2.5 kilometre by 2.5 kilometre area. And those red veins that are mapped there are what was originally mapped back in 2012. The resource that we've been drilling out the resource for the last 12 months. It's a confirmatory resource. What we're simply trying to do is bring it up to JORC standards. So none of the work that we're doing is designed to increase the resource. It's not designed to confirm the resource. So we're drilling those structures you see on the map there. The original work was done on about 27,000 metres of drilling with 201 holes, and what we're doing is we're adding to that with trenches, confirmatory trenches, and by the time we finish the program, about another 20,000 metres of drilling. So you might notice the spacing of those veins. They're quite wide apart when you look at them. And the reason is there's no work done in between them. So as a vein swarm, what we're eventually looking to do is do what we term as the infill exploration between those veins, and we anticipate the resource to grow substantially. Work to date has shown that we've increased the vein density by 30%, so we've got 30% more veins that we've identified drilling the existing structures and around the existing structures. We've also shown that gold mineralisation is vertically over 450 metres. The original resource was only looking at 100 metres and 180 metres, so we sort of doubled the knowledge of where gold is in the system. We've also identified that there's low-grade halos around a lot of the veins in this particular area. That doesn't happen all through the property, but in this particular area it does. And we've managed to extend a lot of these structures by up to 160, 200 metres in some cases. I point your attention to the section D1, D2, which we're going to look at on the next slide. This particular hole was drilled, and we were testing that vein there called Enseada and another one called Venado. And when we came between those two, we identified another structure. Then we punched through and we were trying to pick up that vein under the Esperanza pit on the left there. And then we found that and we kept going, and we actually pushed this hole down to 630 metres. And those veins we're intersecting at the end of the hole run between about 400 and 600 metres. The reason for pointing that out is if you recall the cross-section on the previous page, around D1 there wasn't a lot of vein density. So these veins will eventually work their way to surface or near surface. So that's an example of how the vein density is not fully reflected in the current resource, and we anticipate it to grow significantly. When Coregold owned the property, they mined it on a small scale. They mined 600,000 tonnes over a period of 3 years. And we went back and did a reconciliation of their pit design against what was processed through the mill they had. They trucked this material 183 kilometres to the Portobello mill, which was associated with the Zaruma mine, which is an asset we recently sold. What we found was that they'd done a pit design based upon 3 veins that they'd identified at surface. They opened it up and they found an additional 8 veins, and the reconciliation shows that they mined 69% more tonnes, but the call on the pit, they recovered 40% more gold at an average recovery of 90%. So it's a low sulphidation system, relatively free milling, at a 15% lower grade. So that gives you an example of what the expectation is as you build this resource out and do the infill exploration. The potential of this is quite significant. We think it's going to grow a great deal from this point on. What we're looking at here is the geophysics interpretation of Copper Duke. In September, October of last year, we flew airborne geophysics over Dynasty and Copper Duke, and this is what Copper Duke looks like. The point of showing you this is that, it's regarded as a tier 1 asset potentially because of its physical size. It's a multi-phase copper-gold porphyry. In looking at this, people look at geophysics. I'm not a geologist, so I don't intimately understand it, but people tend to look at the pretty colours and say, is that where the metal is? Well, what you see here is a representation of porphyry intrusions that have come up in these arcs, little pink dots in rows, and the centre that's dotted in the centre there is 5 kilometres across, and when you put a 0.1 copper contour around that and the surface work that we've done, you get a very large alteration footprint. In fact, that footprint's as big as any tier 1 copper project in the world today. The geophysicist who did the work for us is a guy called Barry Bourne, who's on our board now, wasn't at the time. I asked him, what does this thing look like? When you're talking about these exploration projects, half the battle is sort of what do you compare it to? So he came back with 2 comparisons, Sera in Chile, which is a Barrick project, and the Reko project in Pakistan. Bottom line is, it looks like that because of the size, because of the we've eroded down to the top of the porphyry. The grades at surface are 5 to 10 times higher than was at Sera at the same time, but you're seeing the same geophysics signature. So the upside there is extremely interesting. It's a exciting project, and we intend to probably drill that next year.